What is Jubilee? That is a good question. It's something that I have thought a lot about when I'm reading certain passages. And so what I'd like to talk about today is the Jubilee and what exactly that means. But first, the Jubilee started on the Day of Atonement, and it began with the sounding of the shofar. The concept of Jubilee comes from the Hebrew Scriptures, specifically Leviticus chapter 5, and there's some other passages in Deuteronomy that also talk about it. And so in the English language, the Jubilee means joy, joyful, an occasion that is, has a lot of joy surrounding it. Jubilee anniversaries and that kind of thing. So very, very neat word. It comes from the Hebrew, and the Hebrew word is yovel, and it actually means the sound of the ram's horn. According to Thayer's dictionary, it means to make a joyful sound. So we kind of get this from the sound of the ram's horn, and it kind of flowed into a meaning of joy, because this was supposed to be a very happy and joyous occasion. So in Leviticus chapter 25, we read this, starting at verse 10. You are to consecrate the 50th year and proclaim freedom in the land for all its inhabitants. Now that would be joyous, don't you think? If you were a slave and all of a sudden freedom was proclaimed, hello, joyful, right? All right, so proclaim freedom throughout the land to all the inhabitants. It will be your Jubilee, when each of you is to return to his property and each of you to his clan. The 50th year will be your Jubilee. You are not to sow, reap what grows by itself, or harvest its untended vines. It is to be holy to you because it is the Jubilee. You may eat its produce directly from the field. In this year of Jubilee, each of you will return to his property. If you make a sale to your neighbor or a purchase from him, do not cheat one another. You are to make the purchase from your neighbor based on the number of years since the last Jubilee. He is to sell to you based on the number of the remaining harvest years. You are to increase its price in proportion to a greater amount of years, and decrease its price in proportion to a lesser amount of years, because what he is selling you is a number of harvests. You are not to cheat one another, but fear your God, for I am Yahweh, your God. So again, just real simply saying the Jubilee, it is connected with a whole lot of joy. And the reason is because slaves were released, and property was returned, and debts were canceled. So what I'd like to just kind of discuss really quick is the Jubilee in and of itself. There are three things that I kind of just want to make I kind of want to make a cursory glance at. And then the third thing is something that we will delve a little bit more in detail. The first thing is the Jubilee is coming, because the Jubilee is connected to the second coming of Christ. The Jubilee, huge joy is going to happen when Jesus comes back and puts his feet on this planet again, and we are going to be ushered into a society of perfection. No debt, no slavery, no murder, nothing that is evil or bad. It's going to be a perfect society ruled and reigned by the Lord Jesus Christ. That is celebration. That is the sound of Jubilee, and it is coming. So the Jubilee is coming. The Jubilee has already come in a way, so that's point number 2. The Jubilee has already come. And by that I mean, in a way, Jesus is our Jubilee. In other words, he ushers in for us everything that the Jubilee stands for: freedom and debt-free and property, right? Significance, things that we get from him are peace and courage and strength and love and joy. All of that is wrapped up in this word Jubilee. And so Jesus, in a very real sense, is our Jubilee. And I want to flip over really quick to Isaiah chapter 61. And this is often called a passage of the Messiah's Jubilee. This is a messianic passage, and you'll understand why in just a minute. Isaiah 61, sorry. The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and freedom to the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of our God's vengeance, to comfort all who mourn. Now, you probably recognize this passage as something that Jesus quoted in Luke chapter 4. He unrolled the scroll of Isaiah and he found the place where this was written, and he read up to where it says to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, and then he stopped. He rolled up the scroll and he handed it back to the attendant, and he sat down, and everybody's eyes are on him. And what does he say? In your hearing today, this scripture is fulfilled. In other words, he has ushered in the year of the Lord's favor. And if you read that, those verses once again, it's real clear that the same concepts are being spoken about in this passage as they are in the passage in Leviticus 25. Proclaim freedom, and it's good news to poor. Why? Because your debts get canceled. That's why it's so joyous. That's why it's a jubilee. We get freedom here. And if you remember this passage, when Jesus quotes it and he says, this is fulfilled, he's essentially saying, I am your Messiah. And what happens? The people get so upset because he's proclaiming himself Messiah that they try to push him off a cliff, right? They try, and he just walks through the crowd. We don't know. He just turns invisible or something. I don't know. But they tried to kill him, and he gets away. Why? Because his time had not yet come. But in a sense, Jesus has already brought us the Jubilee because he is the Messiah. He ushered in a portion of the Jubilee already, and we are experiencing it now. If we are believers in him, if we belong to him, we can experience Jubilee now. And that leads me to my third point. My third point is that you can experience Jubilee to a greater and greater degree depending on how much you're willing to follow these prescriptions in Leviticus 25. So let's look at them really quickly so we can see. I want more joy in my life. I hope you want more joy in your life. So I want to see, how can I get more joy in my life? The first thing that was supposed to happen was that slaves were set free. So what happened a lot of times back in the day, if you got into dire straits and you had a bunch of debt and you were trying to pay off your debt, you would sell yourself into slavery. And usually it was more like a term of service. It wasn't slavery like we think of it today. But you would sell yourself to somebody for a number of years, or sometimes if you owed a lot of money, you would sell yourself until the next Jubilee, basically. So you would sell yourself, they would give you the money, you would pay off your debt, and you would work for them for the next X number of years. Well, when the Jubilee came, you were set free and allowed to go back to your own business. And so I kind of think about that as, if somebody owes me a debt, somebody is my slave, they're in service to me. In other words, they owe me because they have hurt me in a way. And I kind of equate this releasing of the slaves, releasing of the people who owe you or owe you a debt, that's the same as forgiveness. The more that we can let people go, in other words, forgive the debt that they have, forgive the debt that they owe us. The more we can do that, the more Jubilee, the more joy we will experience in our lives. And I don't know about you, but forgiveness is hard. It's not easy to let go of something that somebody has hurt us. But the more we can, the more joy we will experience. The more of Jesus' life we will experience. The second thing that happened was that people were there was a rest. I'm sorry, I'm going to the third thing. The rest. There was a resting for the land. In other words, the land was to lay fallow. And there was a Sabbath year, so you counted off 7 years, and then the 7th year was a Sabbath. And after 7 sevens, so 7 times 7 is 49 years, the 50th year would also be a Sabbath year. And so what happened then, that's the Jubilee, the 50th year is the Jubilee. So what happened was you weren't supposed to till, you weren't supposed to harvest, you weren't supposed to store in barns or reap. You could go out and pick the food and have it for dinner, but you weren't supposed to do any kind of sowing or reaping. And the point of that was that you were supposed to just rest in God's provision. And I see a couple of things here. We're supposed to rest in the fact that Jesus finished the work of salvation. He has completely finished it. It's already done. We can't do anything to make that any more, we can't do anything to make us more saved, right? It's done, it's finished. That work is done, and we need to rest in that work because we can't do anything to make it better or make more of it, right? And so we rest in the finished work of God. We can also rest in the fact that He cares for us, that He loves us, that He provides for us. Everything we have, you see, belongs to God. The salaries that you make at work, the food that you bring home from the grocery store, the house that you live in, the utilities you pay, the electronics we enjoy, the vacations we go on, all of that really belongs to God, right? And He has given it to us in such an amazing way of care and love, and we need to rest and trust the fact that He's just going to care for us no matter what, because He loves us. The same way that He cares for the birds that don't sow or reap, or the same way that He clothes the fields of grass with beautiful flowers, that's how He cares. He cares way more for us than He does for those creatures. And so we should rest in His care. Rest. Release people from the debts that they owe you and rest. And the more you can do that, the more joy you get, the more joy you experience. And the final thing kind of teams off of that. People were to return to their land, their ancestral land. See, in ancient Israel, land was never sold. The only thing you were really selling was the number of harvests to the next Jubilee. And so if there were more years, like let's say it's year, 48, and I sell my land, and there's 48 years to the next Jubilee, the price of the land is going to be higher because there's more harvests in between now and then. If there's only 2 years left until the Jubilee, then the price is going to be lower because there's less years between now and the Jubilee, less harvests. At the Jubilee, I get my land back, right? And so again, it's kind of this thing that we don't really own that land. Really, it's God's land. Really, He's given it to us, and it was never supposed to change hands permanently to another clan or another family. And so what I would have to do as the person who had received the land and was benefiting, had paid for these harvests, I would have to release it back. For, however many years, here I am thinking it's mine because I've been reaping from this land for that many years, and yet it's really not mine. I have to release it back to the person who really owns it. And that's hard to do. Letting go of something that really isn't yours to begin with. Letting go of possessions that really aren't yours, right? And so the more that I can let go of stuff, let go of possessions that really don't belong to me, again, the more Jubilee, the more joy I'm going to have. Releasing people from the debt they owe, forgive them. Resting in the finished work of Christ and the love and care that He has for you. And just relinquishing your hold on stuff that doesn't belong to you anyway. I hope and I pray that this week you will experience more and more Jubilee in your life because you put these things into practice. God bless you. like this video, please share and head over to my channel and subscribe. Thanks!